All right, what's going on, everybody? This is your professor, Dr. Jace K. Austin, and welcome to week number 5. That is right, week number 5 of your Cultural Heritage Seminar course, which is 9410 currently, and maybe one day it will be a course of its own. However, we are not there yet. So, we are still going to go by that course number of 9410. This is my check-in video. It is optional, and we will discuss some things very quickly, and then you will go back to your reading. So first, a little bit of course housekeeping for those of you who need it. One thing that I do want to just kind of point out, there were more missing first papers than I wanted. The vast majority, of course, got those turned in, but this first written assignment, it was due on February the 16th. That is the visit to a cultural heritage site slash write-up and reflection. Again, the vast majority of you turned it in. However, I'm missing 4, which is not quite what I am wanting or what is quite optimal. Now, I don't know if having the modules may have helped with that. But in any case, those due dates are listed on your syllabus, and they are also listed in the assignments section. So I am expecting for you all to abide by those due dates that I have put into the course. So if you have not turned in that first written assignment, please go ahead and turn it in as soon as you possibly can. I am going to, for the 4 that I am missing, I am going to institute a bit of a grace period here. Get it to me by the end of the week, and there will be no points deducted again because there were 4 missing. Which again is, I think there are 21 of you, so the vast majority did get those turned in on time. But for those of you who didn't, since there were so many missing, I am going to entertain the idea that I may have had a little bit to do with that, in which case, A, I apologize, and B, yes, let's correct that now. And so what we're going to do is actually look at the remaining due dates, show you where to find them so that you will not have any further issues. So, as far as the other written assignments, you do have the 4 Heritages paper, which will be due early April, April the 5th, and then your argument paper based on the Confederacy is going to be due on May the 10th. There is not an assignment due in March as far as written assignments. However, there is going to be a midterm quiz in March, and also March will be a good time for you to do your mini interview with your heritage worker. It is not due until April, and I've already actually got one that has been turned in. But March, because there is going to be some downtime in March, March might be the time that you want to tackle that particular assignment. So just putting that on your radar. Please, please, please do not be late on assignments. Also, when it comes to the discussions, because again, I want this to be a discussion-heavy course, and you all have done very well with that thus far. When it comes to the discussions, what's happening is the discussion boards for each week are locking up a week after the due date. That's how that's working. It is fine for you to keep on contributing to the discussion prompt or the discussion board until it actually locks, and I actually generally put the grades in after the lock is happening. So the lock is happening a week, again, the lock is happening a week after the discussion board post is due. So if you've got, and I'm just going to show you in my teacher view, you're not going to be able to see this in student view, but I can do this in teacher view and just show you very quickly So, for instance, what was due, week 3 was due on February the 9th, and it locked on February 16th. I put the grades in after it locked on the 16th, and so that's pretty much how I'm going to approach it. So you can actually keep adding things to your week 4 all the way through February 23rd, even though it was due on February 16th. It'll lock on February 23rd, and that's when I will put the grades in for that one, and that is how things are going to go for the remainder of the semester. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. I am just an email away, austinj@missouri.edu. Any place, anytime, any town, I will respond. So that is pretty much all that I have for the housekeeping. We do have on, is it March the 3rd? Actually, I do need to look at that. We've got another sync session coming up, and that is going to be, yeah, March the 3rd. So we still got a few weeks, but I will be sending reminders, and come March 3rd, we will have Mr. Sweeney, and he'll be coming in discussing the Missouri Centennial, or Missouri Bicentennial, actually, I believe. So be aware of and mindful of that. So the last thing that I wanted to do, and I'm probably going to spend like maybe 5 minutes talking about this, because again, I just sort of also use these check-in videos to give a little bit of my own opinion and perspective, and I will be doing that again right now. There's no need to do anything different from the usual at this point. So, one thing that I want you all to be just kind of mindful of or aware of when it comes to intangible heritage, which is the focus of our week. So, one of our readings is the West Africa's oral histories tell us a more complete story than traditional post-colonial narratives. Here is something that I want to just kind of have you all keep in mind. And I think that, and we're going to talk about some things that might not be very comfortable to talk about in this class, but they're discussions that I think grown folks should be able to have, and they are discussions that I think are relevant to our subject matter. So, when we are talking about oral histories in Africa in particular, and I've got a lot of friends that are from Africa. I'm actually considering relocating to Ghana once my parents have passed, but I probably won't do that while my parents are alive. But Ghana is a particular African nation that is welcoming American blacks to come back to the motherland and go specifically to Ghana. They have been welcoming Americans with open arms. Currently, and this isn't much by any means, but currently it's believed that there's a population of 3,000 permanent residents in Ghana who are of African American descent. So 3,000 again is not a lot, but you know, that just shows that there is a presence of that there, and I think that's something that's going to continue to grow. But anyway, having said that, one thing that we just kind of deal with, I believe, in this country, something that's kind of a framework in this country, whether we want it to be or not, is a degree of white supremacy. And what I am going to say is that, and actually, one thing that's kind of jogging my mind about this right now is that I saw a comment actually on Facebook yesterday. And somebody was saying, I think the exact comment was, Africans, claiming there's no correlation between IQ and race, and then it said, also Africans, invented nothing but sticks in a million years. So this was kind of a slight for people of sub-Saharan African ancestry, Basically, it was a statement that I guess European or white civilizations have progressed further, have invented more, so forth and so on. And so there is some form of supremacy among those of European descent compared to those of African descent. And I've heard this type of rhetoric throughout my whole life. I've heard it ever since I was in elementary school. I remember in elementary school, teacher responding to a question about why don't we have more lessons about Africa, and the teacher just said, well, all the history happened in Europe. There was no history in Africa. And so that's why I think that it's very important to have articles such as this one on your reading list, the Quartz Africa article about West Africa's oral history tradition. So basically, and I'm guilty of this myself. I'm a former newspaper reporter, and my friend who is a psychologist, he says that I, quote, believe in the written word. And that is something that I think is actually kind of a Western way of looking at things, or some people would say even a colonial way of looking at things. I will just say, for the purposes of keeping things halfway friendly in here, I will say it is a Western way of looking at things, to where we place the emphasis on the written word. If it is penned, it is legitimate. If it is written, it is legitimate. And those things that are told through oral tradition are things that could be rumors, that could be unproven, so forth and so on. And so as I started to get to know more and more Africans, one thing that I noticed is that oral tradition is very strong, specifically in West Africa, but throughout the entire continent. And oral tradition is not shared with everyone. So oral tradition, it can contain a lot of knowledge, a lot of heritage, a lot of wisdom, a lot of things like, how do we heal people in our village or our community? How do we teach people? How do we cook? All of these various things that might not be written down things when it comes to African tradition. These things might be passed down through oral tradition from one generation to the next. And so one thing that we have to kind of get past, or one thing that I'm hoping that we'll get past, is this idea that because it was not the quote-unquote written word, that it is less valid, or that it is less credible. There are ways that Europeans pass down knowledge from one generation to another, and that does appear to be the written word. But Africans do things differently, and I don't think that just because things are done differently, that means that one way is better than the other. And there is a lot of history that did happen in Africa, but because the written word wasn't there, there are those who want to kind of claim that it didn't happen, or brush over it, or underestimate the gravity of that history. And so I think that's unfortunate. But there were civilizations in Africa prior to colonization from Europe or from the Islamic world, which the Islamic world also colonized Africa before the Europeans, even in some places. Yeah, that's something that I want you all to be mindful of, and this can be whether it comes from Africans or Aboriginal populations in Australia, or indigenous populations here in North and South America. One thing that I just want you all to be familiar with is that a lack of writing does not mean a lack of history and heritage and a lack of civilization and accomplishment. It is just a different delivery, and there may be reasons for that different delivery. And when I say that there were when I say that there were civilizations in Africa prior to colonization, also I am talking about, places that existed, places like Kush that existed outside of Egypt. Because I think, well, I should say, I think I said Kush. Actually, I think I might have been better off saying Timbuktu. Hold on. All right, so I'm sorry, I did want to double check on something. So Kush is actually, I knew Kush was Ethiopia, but I think that there was actually Egyptian influence there. And as you all are probably aware, Ethiopia is right there with Egypt in that region of the country. I mean, of the continent. Actually, the empire that I was speaking of was the Empire of Mali. And that actually did, that empire sort of, also, just to be clear, that empire did sort of come about after there was Islamic influence in West Africa, but there was not this was prior to the transatlantic slave trade, so it was prior to European colonization and slave trade, but there was already an Islamic presence in West Africa when the Empire of Mali arose. But there were other empires that preceded European colonization, and that's something, and other civilizations that preceded it. There were paved roads in Africa before Europeans got there, and that's something that may not be documented in writing so much, but there is that oral tradition. But unfortunately, there are those who, again, scoff at the oral tradition. So I want to expand your viewpoints on that just a little bit. One thing that I just try to do in all of my teaching, whether it's here or reference or intellectual freedom or wherever, I am looking to just sort of dismantle some remnants of white supremacy that occur within our field. But that's not all that I'm looking to do. But especially when it comes to this particular topic, is something that needs to be addressed. So I am going to end it right there. I did not keep it under 15 minutes. I apologize, but there's nothing else to say really. And again, this is an optional video that you could have sped up. And from there, I will just say, look at those readings, hit the discussion post. Your discussions have been absolutely brilliant, and that is what I like to see. With that said, I am out. This is Dr. Jace. Thank you for your peace-loving grace, and we will see you next week. Peace.